If you have any ad dollars to spend or your consumer dollars, just give all that money to news. That is like, the easiest way we can save news. For me, like I write a subscription product, right? It's like how my company helps grow is subscribers, but also like how we help grow is ad-based journalism.
This is the Snarketing Podcast, for marketers by marketers, talking to marketers with just a touch of snark. Now, here are your hosts, Valerie, Vespa, and Matt Wurst.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on when you're listening to this. My name is Matt Wurst, and I am a co-host of the Snarketing Podcast.
And I am Valerie, the other co.
I am excited for this conversation because we are quickly getting into the meaty part of the year. It is episode 3 of the Snarketing Podcast, and we have a whole year ahead of us. But in the next week, one of my favorite events, South by Southwest, is coming up. And for the last few years, I've spent a good chunk of that time with this guest. So instead of talking about the news of the day, because ironically, that is what she does for a living. She talks about the news of the day. Let's talk about our favorite South by memories to get people excited about the upcoming event. Can we do that?
Oh my goodness. Where do we begin?
How many have you been to? Can you first tell me how many South by Southwest have you been to?
Between the music one and the kind of media related one, I would say 7. Not that many.
Isn't it strange though that it actually evolved from like a culture event to a media and marketing event? It's kind of sad.
It's like, it's so bad for those that were, knew it as a music related event. Yes. But what was most interesting.
There's 2 different weekends. I mean, at least they have that. There's only very minor overlap, but there are people who stay for like 10 days and those people are crazy.
What I found very interesting, not last year, but the year prior, was how entertainment, like theatrical and such, came through in a major way like I've never seen before. Did you notice that? Like Nick Cage was like launching like a film there or something.
I don't think that's as new as you may think. I remember like 5 years ago sitting next to Ewan McGregor at a random restaurant who was there to promote a movie that I'd never heard of and have not thought about since because I couldn't even tell you what it was. So I don't think that is atypical. I remember going to a launch party for remember the show Community with Joel McHale?
Oh yeah, that's a great show. Yeah,
like I went to a Yahoo event for them. Like there's always been that crossover. I think what's interesting is that it's actually gotten away from. I mean, you remember that's where like Twitter and Foursquare and some of those platforms all launched, or I can't even remember which ones, but like that was kind of the big thing that was happening there. And now it's like, hey, can I get into the Lizzo party?
It's so true. It's like every event that we do. It's just, that's what happens, right? I guess.
Well, I think I've been to maybe, I don't know, 10-ish, maybe 12. I can't keep track. They all kind of blend together for me because I've spoken at the actual event before. I've done peripheral programming. I've gone without a job and just like coasted. My favorite memory, though, to refresh your recollection, 1 year ago at a dinner somewhere in town, we were out and we were like, let's do a podcast. Do you remember that dinner?
Oh, I do.
Do you remember the podcast? First of all, it wasn't called Snarketing. What was our name for it?
It was something related to, oh gosh.
What were we going to call it? I don't even remember.
Oh my God. We'll get back to you. Yeah, it was a different.
Yeah,
it was centered around events, media and marketing events, right?
So what we were going to call it, it's come to me. We are the pros at conferencing, so we were going to call it Pros and Cons. Remember?
That's pretty good. That's pretty damn good.
But I thought it was too cerebral. We know our audience; they're not that smart.
Snarketing makes very clear sense too, and I think that's important for branding.
It's very obvious. Well, I also, the night before, spent a dinner sitting next to our guest today, which is an incredible, just testament to friendship, personal and professional. You met her. Did you meet her for the first time in Cannes last year?
I believe so. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess we're living out the pros of conferencing through our podcast anyway.
We are. We are. She's wonderful, and I can't. And she loves her job, so I can't wait to speak to her about what she's up to.
She is a pro at pros.
Wow.
You know her, you trust her. It's Axios media reporter Kerry Flynn. No one has their finger on the pulse of what's happening at the intersection of marketing, tech, media, and dogs quite like this fellow Harvard graduate. She's snarky, she's smart, and she's bridging the gap between journalism and marketing unlike anyone else around. Hi Kerry, hi Val, oh, and hey Matt.
Kerry Flynn, welcome to the Snarketing Podcast. We are so delighted to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here. You know, as a listener of the podcast, I feel like all your recent guests have been like C-suite executives. So it is just an honor to be here, is what I will say, given that I do not have such a lofty title.
You may not have the lofty title, but you are connected in our industry. I'm making air quotes, listener. You are connected in a way that many are not. People trust you, people love you, but you're also kind of, you know some secrets as well. And that comes with the territory, right?
For sure. Trust and love, though. I appreciate that you shared that. That's really the goal. That is, I feel, what every journalist wants to hear when their name is said.
I got to tell you, the first time I met you, which I didn't actually meet you, I just saw you on a stage, was at Advertising Week a few years back, I believe, and you were moderating several panels that I happened to be attending, and you were so good, such a great moderator that like I actually feel like you should just be moderating this podcast today. You really are. You're smart. You ask the right questions. So anyway, and then I perchance meet you in person or one-to-one in Cannes, and then I feel very lucky to have you as my friend.
Well, thank you for saying that, and I am so happy we're connected now. And I would happily moderate this conversation because I think my seat is harder to be in. Like, I am the type of person where I think moderator is easier. Like, you just have to listen to what people say and just keep the conversation going. Versus me, I have to like try to like give smart answers and sound intelligent, and that's hard.
We want you to feel comfortable. So if at any point you want to just turn the tables back and start asking us questions, I can't promise that we'll answer them, but if we're here to help you. But I think this is a great place to start because your background as someone who is in and around our space for a long period of time is really an interesting journey. But I would love for you to tell us about how you grew from your early days in Boston up through Mashable, now to Axios. How have these experiences shaped your just overall perspective on media, on marketing, on technology?
Huge question.
We'll get the hard question out of the way first. How about that?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'll try to be as brief as I can be. Now I'm at Axios and I cover media for them. It's been a long journey. And I think one thing I'll share is that Axios just turned 7. So I was not covering media when they launched, but I was in the New York media circle. And I remember when they launched and I was like, I'll just say, I was like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. Like, why do people want to read news in bullet points? I was someone who, loved news and loved writing and loved reporting. And I just saw this media company come up and it was so weird and confusing to me. Again, as someone who used to like write for newspapers and at the time then was out more like a blog site, I just like didn't get it. And then so fast forward to like, now I like work at this company. And it was this big realization that, oh, like people aren't just like me. Like people don't actually like reading the news. There's actually a lot of people who really hate the news industry. So a long way of saying the fact that through my like career journey, I've learned that like I love working in this industry, even with how difficult it is, especially with layoffs after layoffs after layoffs. And it's,
Are those still happening? You want to add a couple more layoffs there, by the way? I think we might need to.
No, totally. Everything's fine. But I just a long way of saying I love this industry, and working at Axios has been like such a great like part, because I just gained the fact that like I just want people to like have facts, right? And like you said earlier, people trust and respect me, and that's what I want people to have, everyone of like any news organization, right? To actually want to click on what we write and learn from there and share. So anyway,
when it
I love
first
my
launched, though, were you confused or concerned that the name might actually mean that you're like an evil news empire? Because that was my first like, we are Axios. Like I thought it was just bad guy. It was like bad people reporting the news, but it's not, obviously. So
as far as
that
I
didn't give you
know,
pause?
I don't think that's the vibe we're going for. I actually just had this conversation the other day, and now like hopefully I don't get fired, but like I can't remember what Axios means. It means, I just looked this up the other day. It has some meaning. Oh my gosh.
Well, I'll Google.
Put your journalism hat on. Go ask some people after this and report back to us. Can you do that? But in succinct bullet points, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think it means one word, for sure. So no, that's not the vibe we're going for, is evil empire. More like the opposite. It's more like trust, is I think one of the core principles, of the matter.
Okay, yeah, I
So,
think
like,
we've come a long way.
you've worked at like some serious heavy hitters, CNN, Digiday, Mashable, obviously now Axios. So, like, are there any like media industry secrets that you think the general public is not aware of that you could share with us today?
Media industry secrets. That's a great question. I think one thing is, it feels like sometimes that like all media organizations are like the same behind the scenes. Like they're all fighting for obviously attention, but like how companies, like the people working for them, they all just kind of blend together. It was fascinating. You think Mashable would be so different than CNN, but what's interesting when I joined is I wasn't the only former Mashable person that worked there, right? And so especially it feels like all these organizations again become even more similar over time, because like Mashable hit its mark by being like, we should be more conversational and digital first, right? And like CNN and more legacy, or an organization obviously that got their start in TV is like, we need to do that, right? And then look at like Digiday, that's more like speaking to a very specific professional audience of the advertising and media industry. And that's kind of like now what I do at Axios too, because Axios is like, oh, we're like this national organization with DC politics focus, but it's like, ooh, how we could expand is we, get some smart people and write for that very like smart audience. So it's just been a fascinating, while the companies I work for are so different, it's been interesting to see actually how they all seem the same. And a lot of what I'm doing now feels like what I was doing in the past. And that's not in a bad way.
Right.
And you alluded to this, and we were slightly joking about it, but I don't think it's really a joke. About the media industry and what's happening. And part of me is curious and concerned that, like, I want to ask you, is media dying or is it just changing, right? Off the top of my head, layoffs from SI and LA Times and CNN and Washington Post and NPR, although NPR just hired a new CEO or CMO, but Vice, NBC, like I could go on forever. For you, in, let's say 3 minutes or less, how do we save it? Or is that possible?
I think how you guys can save it, for if you have any ad dollars to spend or your consumer dollars, just give all that money to news. That is like, the easiest way we could save news. For me, like I write a subscription product, right? It's like how my company helps grow is subscribers, but also like how we help grow is ad-based journalism, right? And I'm speaking literally a panel next week about this exact topic, and how you save it is bring more money in. And so that's kind of from the outside, but how the inside, and a lot of those companies you mentioned, is like a reason why they're dying is because the way that they made money is just no longer feasible. My lovely colleague Sarah Fisher actually just published a story recently about this topic because of just layoffs like we talked about. And the main issue is the way that these companies operated, and their glory days like Vice was through digital ad dollars, right? There was just this rise of money there, or even on YouTube, right? Like you can at the time more easily make money and really become this like disruptor of traditional media. There was so much attention and money. That's just not the case anymore. Another issue of that, so the way they made money is just not there. And then another issue is some of those companies like Vice took on debt, right? And with the way that the business like market is these days, it's now there's just no way to get rid of it.
They did throw some great parties, by the way, so I don't know if that was like contributing to it. Those parties don't happen anymore.
I do miss those parties personally, and yeah, those were fun. Those are the glory days. Also, their office, like it's wild to think that Vice is no longer in Williamsburg, right, and has that big glorious office space. So yeah, moral of the story is, it's not to say that media was so easy, like right in the 2010s, but it's a very different game these days, and that's why you're seeing so much diversification. It seems so obvious, right? The way that you be a successful media company is diversify your revenue, but it's those companies just weren't doing it enough. And so credit back to like my company is like, we're trying to make sure that we don't fall into that pit, right? The way that we started was making money on newsletters, right? That's not as easy as it used to be because there's so many competitors, like Semaphore, right? Like it's like that didn't exist when we started. We're now fighting for similar ad dollars. So like that's why we have a subscription business, which I'm involved in. We just recently announced Axios Entertainment. So that's making money off of, studios like documentaries and doing docuseries. So it's just a new streamline. We're doing a lot more events, so maybe not parties for party's sake, but events that help us make money.
Well, it sounds like there's a qualitative and a quantitative challenge. There are many, many, many more platforms and channels fighting for dollars. The amount of dollars that are being spent are drying up. But I also don't remember early days in my career, the dire, desperate need for these companies to make money. Like they just did. And it's now, you're right. It's a different world.
Yeah, I mean, that's where the attention is. I've read about, one, I'm super passionate about the magazine industry just because I'm a big fan of like magazines, but the downfall of Condé has been really sad, right? They're legacy, iconic brands that, household names that people love, but it's like, it's just a magazine ad isn't what it used to be, obviously. But, then they pivoted to try to make more money on digital, clearly. But like, with the way people find their news these days, and especially when it comes to what they cover, like fashion, is Instagram and TikTok and influencers. Like it's just not what it used to be. Again, I'm not saying anything that's revolutionary, but it's been wild how fast that change has come, and about how so many companies were they tried, but it's like there's only so much some of them could do.
I know, and it's sad because I agree. Like when I'm getting my nails done, I love a good magazine. And I wish that I still had a subscription to a paper magazine, but it's like it's just nobody. It's like I don't know. Anyway, so speaking to digital transitions, and in traditional media, in your view, what has been sort of the biggest impact on that digital transformation has created on the traditional media outlets?
I think you bring up a great point of just like where people spend their time and where like the audiences are, right, is one thing that has for sure changed. But there's also, so like just the consumption of like TikTok. I think I could talk about TikTok all day, but TikTok, I remember when it came out when I was at Digiday and I started covering it early on, and I was just like so fascinated immediately by the algorithm, right? Especially was interesting to me because that was at the time where there was so much negativity around algorithms, especially Facebook's algorithm, right? Especially post the 2016 election. And I'm like using this app and I was like, this algorithm is crazy. Like it is like so smart and just keeps you so hooked. And that's what everyone wants, right? Like where you have this like loyalty and attention, where it's the fact that I could just spend hours a day on TikTok. What they brag about is people watch a movie a day on there, and it's true. So that's what's really changed, is the fact that people aren't dedicating their time to a magazine. They're not buying it. They're not spending their time there because they're using these other there's just so many other places to go. But then there's also the flip side too of like how you make money, right? Too, where the rise of like digital ad networks. This is something, you guys are definitely more sophisticated about it than me, but I speak with companies all the time. Like I just interviewed the CRO of Mad Hive, which is kind of like a trade desk S company, and how they're trying to work with, publishers on the back end to like bring more money in the door. going back to what we're talking about though, how you save news, it's still just like block lists, right? It's just like the fact that like the easy ad dollars aren't coming through the door because of lists like that. And so it's like, that's what I'm saying. There's two things going on, right? There's the audience isn't there because of the rise of apps like TikTok. And then there's the back end, the way that how ad dollars are getting there, they're easier to stop.
So do you, I mean, full transparency, because that's what we are here. You're the first journalist we've had on the Snarketing Podcast, and the line between marketing, content, and journalism is gray. Are we entering a world now where publisher as a term is taking on a different meaning, where maybe you, not necessarily Axios, but others will become content creators who share news across other platforms instead of having their owned and operated channels, where you now have to kind of become half marketer, creator, influencer, half journalist? And this is a two-part question, because I will say that some of the best people I've ever worked with are hired at agencies or even on the brand side are former journalists. So do you think about that graying intersection or overlapping of skill sets?
Yeah, for sure. I think some of the most successful people, I would say, like in this world, are people that are so passionate, right? And I think show their passion in what they do. And so what you're talking about when it comes to content creation and like essentially a journalist becoming their own brand, it's because they clearly like love what they do. And so like when those types of people like me like aren't just writing a story, and my job is to like help produce a newsletter, right? So I'm not just producing this newsletter and being like, okay, bye, done for the day. I'm like posting on LinkedIn, I'm posting on my Instagram, I'm on this podcast right now, I do TV hits. It's like that's part of my job, but not really in the job description necessarily. And that's how one succeeds and wins. And I think back in like traditional media, you could be a reporter at the New York Times, and yes, your job is just writing, doing journalism and hoping your story appears on A1. But like these days, I think how you succeed is doing so much more than that in that business, where so it's not just necessarily your name is like, I'm Kerry Flynn, I work at Axios. It's like, I'm Kerry Flynn, like, and you can see, and I also work at like Axios, and that,
well, do
I don't know,
you have to keep different, well, do you have to keep different personalities then? Because like who you are as a journalist may be different than who you are on Instagram. And
yeah,
maybe that's not fair, but like, you're not going to be posting pictures of your pets on Axios. I don't think. Maybe you are, maybe you're not.
You say that, but I actually am. And I think that's one thing that is like very much changed a lot as well, is there's still the principles of journalism, right? Of like not showing bias. My company is, and so many, news organizations prioritize that a lot, is like, I clearly have my opinions, I vote, but like, those are things that I do not share, like in those conversations of where they lie. And I don't try to have it influence my journalism, but I am like a real person, and I will share wearing a dog sweater right now. Clearly I love dogs, and I do share pictures of dogs, and, we'll do at Axios, we call these things called thought bubbles, where I'm writing a story and I'll write Kerry's thought bubble, and it's just like 3 like sentences that are actually like my opinion. It's not just, oh, I picked up the phone and this person told me. It's more like I am like a real human, and this is what I think. So I think that has changed. I obviously, with all the
I like that
going on in the world, I don't think we're going to see people, blur every line, but it for sure has changed.
Right.
I try to
you're
what I'm saying.
You're a content creator, and in theory, like you are selfishly trying to get people to read more of your stuff. Like, so like you have to sort of sell yourself in that in that sense. I mean, if you're thinking about it from that perspective a little bit.
Please pardon this brief pause as I read some words from our sponsor. The Snarketing Podcast is sponsored, in part, by Zarbee's Kids Melatonin Gummies. When your kids can't fall asleep, this effective drug-free bedtime sleep aid supplement will do the trick. For children ages 3 and up.
Email news blasts. Obviously, they're hugely popular, so congrats on the success of that. What is your sort of algorithm for figuring out and creating content that resonates with so many people?
I think agreed. Like when it comes to looking at my inbox right now, I like have it pulled up, and it's wild the number of like email blasts that I get. I think one quick trick, and it's so obvious, is just having a good subject line, right? Like that is just when it comes to the basics. I am a big fan of emoji too. Like, and so I think being very creative in your subject line and including a cute emoji, I mean, not just cute for cute sake, but like an emoji that makes sense with it. That's how you win that battle. We see it in the results, like honestly.
Are you,
So yeah,
by the way, are you
that's
saying this because you saw my recent LinkedIn post where I quoted
You always.
a statistic that emails with emojis perform 60% better than those without in the subject line?
wow. So I'm not introducing anything new to you. You guys get it. That's
Well, clearly you don't
cool.
follow me on LinkedIn, but that
I do
is
follow
we
you.
need to change.
There's so much content on LinkedIn now. It's going back to our conversation. It's not as easy to be a LinkedIn influencer because there's too much there.
Yes, if I could be a full-time LinkedIn influencer, I would, but I also have a family and a job, and you can't do that 24/7. But
Matt, you're
Well, I
great.
appreciate
You
you
use
talking.
video. You like your emoji work is impressive, I must say.
I record videos like while waiting in the parking lot to pick up my son at bar mitzvahs. That is where my video content originates from. It's like I'm bored. So thank you for that. But I guess it's a good question for you, Kerry Flynn, in terms of like from your vantage point, are there emerging technologies or platforms that you believe will continue to disrupt or change the media industry now and forever?
This isn't new, and I know I've already feel like I've talked so much about TikTok, but I think short form video is still on the rise. And I think one thing that we're starting to see is how journalists themselves and news organizations start to invest more in that. And so I've been tracking a lot of like younger digital media companies, like startups essentially, that is their core like business. There's one that I'm fascinated by called the News Movement that's based out of the UK. They got a lot of attention because their CEO is the one that is now running the Washington Post. And there is another one called the Daily Aus in Australia. There's just all these ones that their whole like it's one person, like telling you the news in a short form, like on Reels or on TikTok. And so I've been fascinated by that space, and we're at Axios, we're starting to do more of that when it comes to Axios Local. And so right now, I think the way we're seeing it, the way some other companies are seeing it, is like it's more like marketing. It's what the Washington Post actually has been known for a while. They've been on TikTok since the beginning, right, and been very invested in that. But the people actually getting the news that way is just for sure on the rise. And so it's something that I don't do myself. And I'm like, should I be doing more of that? Because when I come to like my importance of like brand, right, I am more of a text-based journalist than I am a video based journalist, but I think that is 100% where the attention is right now. And again, it's how we can succeed in the news business is if that's where people are, we want them to see news reporters doing things like that, not just like nothing against like online creators who that's their job day to day, but it's like they're aggregating from reporters, right? And they're sharing their views on that. But it's like they're people doing the work themselves, I think is one thing that we'll see more of this year.
But would it be that hard for you? And I'm not telling you how to do your job because you are the master interviewer and content creator in your own right. But would it be that hard to be talking to a source or a subject and just turn video on and say, can I record this and turn these into snippets? Like, again, I'm not telling you should or shouldn't do it, but from an omni-channel creative perspective, it doesn't seem like it's rocket science, right? Is it just time commitment at that point or comfort?
Yeah, I think approaching it with the right strategy, right? There are some conversations I have where it's like you don't want that like produced that way, but there's others like I do a lot of sit down meals with people where it's just like pretty easy Q&A, and like there are times when I think about it, and this is something I could do myself or talk to my company is like, why don't we do this as a video? Why don't we do it exactly what you're saying, more like a clip? And that's where it's like hot ones is like I love hot ones. I'm a big fan because I like spicy food, but two, it's like there's such a good case study of the fact of like having real conversations with people, and like not to say they're not doing like hardcore journalism, but it's like that style of like where you're
it's also very real too, right? Like you want to see who's sweating bullets because the spicy food is too hot for them. Like that's authentic.
So I'm not saying that hot ones can save media, but I'm saying there's a reason that like people watch Hot Ones. And like, can you imagine if more like traditional hard news reporters like kind of deliver the news that way? The people I'm talking about are like people like local news reporters, like I'm saying, the ones that spend like 2 hours at like city council meetings and like do like these hardcore reports and that like produce such important journalism, but like people aren't necessarily reading it, right? And so it's like, how do you get them to read it? And I think that's really what it comes down to, being more of a person and showing your personality. At the same time, like the way we reach people is smart brevity, writing things short, but I think there's also more of a power to like delivering it via the way that people are watching more, which is video.
Right. So you've interviewed many important tech and media VIPs. So who has left the most lasting impression on you?
Wow, that's
And
a
why?
really
Present company excluded, obviously.
Yeah, right.
Wow, a very interesting question. Who left the best impression on me? I feel like it's a cop-out answer. But I interviewed will.i.am at Salesforce Dreamforce. Like, this was when I was at Mashable. And I think about that conversation all the time because, well, one, I like tried not to be too much of a fangirl because like obviously I love the Black Eyed Peas. But like two, I was like, he's actually like, he gets like dragged all the time for like, you know, having ideas in the tech industry that go nowhere. But when I had that sit down conversation with him, I'm like, oh, he's like actually like a really smart guy, you know, and it goes back to what I'm talking about, passion. Passion gets you really far, and you can just like feel that out of someone, and not in like a like con man like kind of way, like in a genuine, honest way. And I think those so I guess that's my answer. But it also is like those kind of people are the ones that sit you know, really like sit would be the most, or the passionate people. I just met with the CEO of VML the other day, the creative agency, and I feel like we were putting
Are those the 3 letters, by the way, that they're sticking with now? I don't know how many letters they've added, but they've subtracted them, right?
They were like, goodbye Y&R, you are dead. It is just VML.
No more Wonderman and Thompson. It's yeah. Okay, good.
It's wild. Yeah,
They have to cut down. They cut back. That's good.
Yeah, there's only so much. This is short, sweet, smart brevity. But anyway, he's like one of those guys too that like I just like sat down with him, and you can tell that he not only is clearly like a good executive, talented at his job, but just like he's like a real human who's like from Kansas City and like loves the Chiefs. And like we talked about Taylor Swift, like he just like is a guy that you can tell that it's that traditional thing of like a guy you want to get a beer with. You know, like those are the media VIPs who I enjoy the most.
They don't always make the best presidents of the United States, those types of people. But will.i.am is an interesting answer. He was actually on stage and at some brand innovators events at CES. And he was referencing and had video to prove it and back it up that he was talking about AI and content and generative experiences like 8 years ago. And when you talk about being bold, but being smart, he nailed it. So I will turn the tables on you and say, what's one bold prediction or idea you have for the future of media and technology?
I thought I already shared that like just all news should just deliver, like hard news should just become hot ones. That's my bold prediction.
I like it.
That's a prediction or a guarantee?
How we do this, how we all save media.
You have to change it though. You can't do it how you have to do it like, all right, we're gonna eat black and white cookies all over New York City while we have conversations.
100%. I don't know. I'm so bad at like predictions of the future. I think what I said too of like more like people putting themselves on camera, people, I mean like the media, like journalists putting themselves on camera is going to be interesting. I am especially fascinated to watch the evolution of my former employer, CNN. And I see them doing more of that, right? With their new CEO, they're talking about becoming more of a digital first organization. You know, the traditional CNN is watching all those, you know, the hours of between 6 and, 11 p.m. where it's just traditional news anchors at a desk. I don't know if that's going to change anytime soon, but I think making those anchors more of a personality on digital, right? Like seeing them in other places is something that will change.
It may not be able to be the same people because those who are engaging in other places got themselves in trouble. So now you have to find a whole new crop of talent, and maybe we're talking to one who know how to bridge that gap.
For sure. I think those are, I talked about the word like passion, right? Like of like, those are the people who can succeed, right? But when it comes to media as well, it's those that are willing to invest their time on. My day-to-day job is not just, sitting here at a desk between 6 and 7 and delivering the news. Like I, with the help of like my team, am going to splice that up and put it on YouTube and put it on TikTok and on CNN.com and just like start to see of like it's again, attention and meeting people where they are, just the obvious. But so that's one company that I am just fascinated to watch their journey. And I see them doing a lot more of that this year.
So the Newsroom was like one of my favorite series of all times. I just wonder for you, what is a typical day or even like an ideal day for you being the media deals reporter at Axios?
I was also a fan of the Newsroom. I remember I binged that show when I first got my first internship in New York before junior and senior year of college. I was working at Money Magazine, and I was like, the show's wild. And talk about it all day. The Boston Marathon episodes.
Exactly.
So what was your question? Oh, what it's like behind the scenes? Now I like totally
like No, yeah. I wonder, like, from TV to in real life, like what is a typical day for you, or even like an ideal day for you, if you don't want to just talk about a typical day?
An ideal day for me. So like a lot of my job, like I shared, is producing a newsletter that goes out at 11 a.m. So like a lot of my morning time is like making sure that's all in a good place. But I like to get back to what I'm saying is like my job being doing so many different things in one day is like my ideal. So like yesterday I did like a Zoom from home TV hit and, finished my newsletter. And then I went to an in-person lunch meeting. And then I went to my office and caught up with some colleagues. And then I had another like source meeting. So it's like doing all those things in one day is like my ideal day, where I'm in doing face-to-face. I'm promoting my work in another platform. I'm doing my job of my newsletter, and just making new connections as well is the ideal day for me.
I'm just disappointed that you don't have like clocks behind you of all the different time zones like they do in old timey newsrooms. Like, what time is it in Helsinki right now? Why didn't you know that, by the way? You can't do the math. They're 6 hours ahead.
What's behind me is, I don't know if you can see over there, those are drumsticks from the Hard Rock cafes, because that's what I do. I collect, so I don't have time zones like clocks, but I have like different locations of the Hard Rock cafes I've been to throughout the world. So that's a fun fact about my home.
That is a fun fact. I'm sorry we can't show that to our listener, but I do believe that maybe we can post it on our social channels for them to see, which is going to be exciting.
Perfect. You're doing media right.
We're doing it. I don't know if we're doing it right, and certainly not well yet. But if you were going to tell someone or give some advice about what they could do well if they're an aspiring journalist, what does it take to make it in this fast-paced world of media reporting?
I like hate myself that I just keep saying the word passion, but like that's how you can do it. It's like if you want to be a journalist, like one, do that like self-check of like, do you actually like that job? Like, would you actually like the things that I just described, or do you want to be more of like a 9-to-5er, or like it's because journalism is not a 9-to-5. So that's like one thing for sure. And I think how to succeed as well is like just start doing it, right? Like which is like hard. So let's say like someone doesn't necessarily have a place to like distribute their work, right? It's like start a Substack, and like maybe or start a TikTok, right? And maybe you don't, have all the followers right now, but if like you're passionate enough, just start producing content. It's like that's what content creators do full time, but if a news journalist can do that as well, so just start putting yourself out there. And I think too, like some of the best journalists are beat reporters, right? Like me, like I cover the media, right? So like how I've like continued to have jobs and be employed is having expertise in certain areas, right? So for instance, I have deep knowledge in digital media, like companies and social platforms. I've covered social for a while, and I also like the advertising and ad tech industry. It's become an expert in something, and that's not to say that that needs to be your beat for the rest of your life. Like, I've changed. I used to cover something completely different. So I just think seize on to something right now that you enjoy covering. Don't force yourself to do something that is.
No, you're right. You're building skills. You're putting tools in your toolbox. And then after this, when you're ready to become the beat reporter at the Boston Globe for the Red Sox or the Patriots, you will know exactly the questions you need to ask because you're used to dealing with millionaires and billionaires, and these are just performers of a different kind.
Wow, thank you for putting it out there. My true life goal.
We manifest here. That's what we do near the end. But the one thing we do at the end of every episode, if you have listened, you know that we have our "You are not prepared for this" lightning round. So we try and ask and answer 6 questions in 60 seconds. We've never achieved it. But let's just say for you 5 minutes on the clock, because I know that if I try and tell you to be succinct, you won't, and vice versa.
Okay. Yep. Sounds great.
Okay. So first question, Val, you kick us off this time.
All right. Your favorite tech gadget?
My Meta Ray-Ban sunglasses. I am actually picking up my new pair after this.
You know, we've seen you in those when we were socializing, and I was concerned that you might be recording and then reporting on some of the events that happen after hours at some of the events that we go to. But thank you for not.
Yes, I did have them on again, and those I took photos with them. I've been such a big fan of them. One of my favorite aspects of it, this is where I feel like I'm like a shill for Facebook, is the sound. Like, so I use them to go on runs. It's not just about taking video and pictures. It's like I can listen to music or I can take phone calls on them, and that's why they're my favorite.
Oh, I had no idea you could. I'm going to have to talk to you about this after. I want those.
Well, maybe you should be reading more about the reports, by the way, that come out from our favorite media reporters who talk about the projects and products.
Good point.
Okay, next question. What is the best conference snack? Like that midday 2:30 to 3:15 break? What are you going for during those conferences?
I am not going for a food. I'm going for an iced coffee. Like, my hope, and the worst conferences for me are conferences that do not have cold brew or iced coffee, because I hate hot coffee. And so at that 2 p.m., 3 p.m., I am begging that there is an iced coffee and a cold brew. And if there is, I am drinking it.
Okay.
One media buzzword you secretly love?
Wow. Platform. So when my first journalism job, I was covering not first journalism job, but I don't know, a job that set me on the path where I am now. I was covering social media, and I kept calling them social media platforms. And my lovely editor was like, platform is a subway platform. Like, platform is not social media. And what's funny is I used to be, then fast forward, I got a job at Digiday where I changed my job title and ended up becoming a platform reporter. But I was like, no, platform is the right word, because it's not an app, it's not a website, it's a platform. And so now I still use it to this day, and you can't stop me.
Off the top of your head, and you have to answer quickly, what is your favorite non-media or tech or marketing newsletter?
Oh my gosh. I feel like I'm a horrible person. I only read newsletters in my own industry right now.
This is why we challenge you.
Or that's the answer.
I used to subscribe to this is an awful answer. I hate myself. I used to subscribe to the Skim. And that it was a fascinating newsletter because it was really popped off when I first moved to the city, and it was essentially written for people like me. It was written for young 20-something white women who live in New York City. And so I weirdly loved it. And I also they got a lot of criticism, including from me, of being a lot cringe sometimes in the way that they present news. At the same time, I just thought they were really a great aggregator, and it really goes back to what I was saying of what attracted me to Axios is people don't like to read the news, and so I appreciated and subscribed and respected them is because they got those young women to read the news. Not every single story, but that. What's sad, and I hate saying, is I actually just recently unsubscribed because I haven't read it in so long, and we could talk about them, the downfall of that media company. But sorry, so that was kind of an answer, right?
Yeah, totally. And if your life or a Pinterest board, what would be your top 3 pins? I'm guessing dogs.
Yes. Dogs, iced coffees, or / espresso martinis. I actually just recently started an Instagram that's dedicated to espresso martinis. So that would probably be number 2 is coffee beverages. And number 3 is hard. I think it would be Disney. I'm like a big Disney adult. I'm not ashamed to say that. I will be going there in a couple weeks. I do a lot of races in Disney. Like I run a lot of half marathons. So it would be Disney content. Yep.
And the last question, and maybe this is related to the last question, you tell us, but if you had to choose a theme song to play every time you walked on stage for the rest of your life to an interview or a conference or a panel, what would that song be?
Oh, I feel like my answer has changed for that like so many different times. Man, I don't know. I'm a big like Miley Cyrus like fan, so I'm trying to think of like Flowers, like literally I mean was my like bop, and it will probably continue to be my bop, but I'm like
so good.
I feel like that'd be like a weird answer though, because it's definitely about like being a single woman, and I'm like a happily married woman, so is that like weird? Like Miley Cyrus, but I just feel like it's also about being independent, like, you know, and like
Correct.
No matter what happens to you, like you can thrive in a situation, and so I also very much connect with that.
Well, Kerry Flynn, you came in like a wrecking ball, and we appreciate it.
That was beautiful.
My walk-up song at my wedding was actually
well, I did not know that. I was kind of hoping I was going to be invited, but I didn't make the cut. I might have been on like the D list, so I didn't know that. But I know that Val and I are grateful that you took some time out of your busy day to stop reporting the news and start making the news, because this is going to explode once we hit all the socials. I'm fully confident.
I can't wait to reshare, double tap. I'm going to go like all your LinkedIn posts right now. I'm going to like follow. You said your AI guy has a LinkedIn like account. Love that.
We're multimedia, but you are the queen of all media. So thank you for joining us.
Next time we bring you on, we'll bring espresso martinis to the table. I think that's
that's my favorite. I can't wait.
Okay, good.
See, I told you, there's really no one better when it comes to breaking this all down. But it has me wondering, do I need my own TikTok account now? Maybe we'll save that for another time. And until the next time, keep the snark high and the curiosity even higher.